So I am Darnisha Grant Harrison, and I'm actually just Darnisha Grant Harrison. I am not a PhD or MD, but I was a microbiologist in the earliest parts of my career and segued into business development and licensing in the very niche area of pharmaceutical R&D. Spent about 15 years in that area, and somewhere along the way, for about 10 years as I was working for other companies, I just had this amazing, intense desire to have my own pharmaceutical company. And 4 years ago, almost exactly, all the stars were essentially perfectly aligned, and Ennaid Therapeutics was born. I started the company to do something a little bit, I guess, different in the pharma world, in that we want to focus on early stage science that is promising the potential to have blockbuster effects in human medicine as well as animal medicine. Take that science, develop it under fast-track planning with an amazing execution as well to get these drugs to patients and the animals who need them. So, with that said, a little bit now about our story. And our first such platform technology that we were successful in licensing was from Florida Gulf Coast University and the University of Washington. And this technology actually is a technology of flavivirus. Our technology focuses on 10 viruses in the Flaviviridae family, 9 of which are in the flavivirus family, and 1 which is in the Hep C virus family, hepatitis C. So we've had a 10-product pipeline, or 10 potential product pipeline, almost since inception of the company. And obviously for global crisis reasons, we have prioritized Zika virus. I think we're all aware of what Zika virus is. Again, it is a flavivirus caused by the bite of the Aedes species mosquito. We've all heard very, very much about this in the news. Zika is an interesting flavivirus because it is vector-borne, but also has a non-vector-borne transmission. And what has happened is that's the scare, the non-vector-borne transmission of Zika, transplacentally, sexually, and even some evidence linking it to saliva as well. Some of the symptoms of Zika, flu-like symptoms that is not usually presented as very, very severe, but the issue is, again, the non-vector-borne aspects of the disease and the fact that it can cause microcephaly in infants and neurologic disorders, particularly Guillain-Barré syndrome. Zika, simply put, is endemic in about 125 countries worldwide. The numbers have been just enthralling in the increase of microcephaly and GBS cases. And so our stance is we feel like there is a huge need to have therapeutic treatments as well as prevention for these flaviviruses. So that is our very specific approach, along with many of our counter colleagues who are developing vaccines for Zika virus. More detail about the vaccine landscape that I won't go into, but what I will mention is another flavivirus, which is dengue virus, which is much larger in scope than Zika, but tends to have just the vector-borne transmission. Zika and dengue are much like first cousins, if you will. Some experts have even likened them to sisters, if you will. But same family of virus, and so you almost cannot talk about Zika without talking about dengue and its impact. And as a matter of fact, some of the symptoms of dengue are far much worse than those associated with Zika virus, especially if you are bitten by a secondary mosquito, which would then cause antibody-dependent enhancement, and those are the most likely lethal cases with dengue. It's spread, again, endemic in about 125 countries around the world, and interestingly enough, there are about 400 million dengue infections annually, and about 2.5 billion people are at risk for contracting dengue around the world. So we've got 2.5+ billion reasons to develop our therapeutic, and swiftly. This is just showing some of the transmission and areas of risk around all parts of the globe. I'll skip over those. Dengue products in development. I think one of the things, again, that makes us somewhat unique is that we're one of few companies developing actual treatments which would slow progression, slow disease spread, and obviously slow or prevent many of the hospital stays. More on the competitive landscape of dengue. Now, what's the economic impact? So the issue with Zika, dengue, is its economic impact. Not a whole lot of deaths from it, but it's the economic impact. And what experts have been able to show in their most recent estimates, Zika is a little bit too early to determine its economic impact, but with dengue, direct impact is about $8.9 billion when you look at it in a stance with endemic countries. These estimates go as high as $39 billion per year with direct and indirect costs globally. So this is certainly a huge, huge issue. Our peptide, these peptide inhibitors that we're developing, is actually a repurposing, if you will, of the very first peptide inhibitor that was approved by the FDA for combination therapy treatment with patients with HIV. So our discoverers were the actual scientists, some of the actual scientists working on that very first peptide inhibitor approved, and brand name Fusion. And so based on that, if we could have the target, the envelope proteins, and get this positive effect in HIV, what if we looked at other viral proteins with a similar mechanism or same mechanism of action, if you will? This is simply showing, which we very much understand now, the viral particle and its envelope proteins, the E dimer. It's an icosahedral form. We understand very much about the viral genome. We could go into those details later, and since I'm not the high science person within the company, I'm more of the strategy, the execution of that strategy, and the growth of the company, but we've got the clear with our discoverers and our chief science officer on our scientific side. So I think in summation, our peptides have shown very clearly in vitro efficacy for Zika virus, greater than 95% efficacy, and for dengue virus, greater than 99% inhibition of the virus. So tremendous efficacy we've shown. And if we look at the pattern that Fusion followed in its successful proven track record of safety as well as efficacy, we feel like that we have and truly believe something very, very impactful in making a more immediate impact in these flaviviruses because of all of the known evidence and the commercial success of Fusion. And there have been many, many, many technical advances to synthesizing peptides since the days of Fusion's approval more than 13 years ago. So my time shows up, and I've got actually a lot of slides. If I had about an hour, we could go through them in grand detail, but I can share actually any of the slides with any of you. And I'll be around for any questions for the next couple of days. Thank you.